Entrepreneurially Thinking is a presentation of BioSTL and CET, Center for Emerging Technologies, with RareGem Productions, changing the way you view new ventures, including you on the pathway to success with your business in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. Here's your hosts, Cheryl and Christy. Now let's get thinking entrepreneurially.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. Our goal is to energize your entrepreneurial mindset and create pathways for business success in St. Louis market and beyond. I'm Christy Maxfield. I run the Entrepreneur Development Services here at the Center for Emerging Technologies.
And I'm Cheryl Watkins-Moore. I lead our inclusion initiative for the region here in the St. Louis market, getting more women and underrepresented minorities to consider starting high-growth, high-net-worth ventures here in our region.
We're doing this show to step outside our comfort zone, and we're asking you to step outside of yours so that you can find new ways of thinking about your business and entrepreneurial ideas.
We want you to take the constraints off of how you view new ventures.
And you can find Entrepreneurially Thinking on all of your favorite streaming media, iTunes, Stitcher, and any platform where you're finding other podcasts. We're glad that you could join us. And today we are sitting down with one of our local entrepreneurs, Zim Hang.
So exciting.
I know. I've had the pleasure and honor of working with Zim for several months now. He is the founder of Chrona Sleep.
And I've just had the opportunity to meet him right now. And I'm like so excited and oh my gosh.
I know cool people.
Yes.
I do. I know some cool people.
You do.
Present company included. And we're just going to spend a little time talking about what it is to actually go from being an undergrad to being an entrepreneur, a pathway that is a little different than some of the other journeys we've discussed previously on our podcast, but also to get sort of some feedback as well on the role of mentors in that process, as well as how you actually go about building a team that can be successful and move forward and really build the kind of environment and culture that you want to see in the world.
And especially from your perspectives, I mean, it's very interesting because you're not one of these folks who've been out in corporate world and decided, you know what, late in life I want to become an entrepreneur like me. I think you have a really unique perspective because you've been in school and then you decided, you know what, I want to follow an opportunity. Maybe you didn't think it was entrepreneurial at that time,
right?
But now you're in this space. So listening to your story and having our audience listen to your story is really, I think, is going to be a treat.
So I'm going to ask Zim to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his company, and we're excited to talk with Zim right after this break.
Now here's Make It Happen with Keith Sales Pro.
How do successful people think? According to author Tom Black of Boxcar Millionaire, here are 5 more beliefs of highly successful people. Successful people are willing to leave their comfort zones. Successful people are consummate professionals and behave accordingly. Successful people accept change as a part of life willingly and completely. And finally, successful people make decisions quickly and then take immediate action. Today, remember, it can happen. It will happen. And together, we will make it happen.
Follow Keith Sales Pro on Facebook or Twitter at Keith Sales Pro, or visit his website at keithsalespro.com.
It can happen. It will happen. And together, we will make it happen.
Hi, I'm Jade Harrell, founder and executive producer of RareGem Productions. And entrepreneurially thinking means to me that you take time to actually think about yourself as an entrepreneur, what your opportunities are, what you want to do, and how you're going to design this life.
Zim, I would love for you to share with us a little bit about yourself, your company, and your journey thus far.
My pleasure. So, my name is Zim. I am the co-founder and CEO of Chrona Sleep, and we are creating a smart pillow to help make 6 hours of sleep feel more like 8.
I think we all need that now.
It would be lovely.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I actually don't need it because I sleep really well. So
because you're the inventor of this great technology.
Yeah, and what's interesting was when I started this, it was very much to cure my ailments in undergrad, right? So 3-4 hours of sleep. And I actually started in architecture. So I don't know if you have any friends in architecture, but sleep deprivation is probably the coolest thing there.
Oh, it's a status symbol.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pervasive across most American culture, but in architecture and in undergrad altogether, it's like, the less you sleep, the more capable you are Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially in architecture, I would think, on the sciences, people, especially if you're pre-med or something like that, because you're studying all the time, that maybe that's the moniker that I would think that you have the sleepless nights, but not in architecture.
Yeah, I think in architecture, where that came from was like drawing the stairs. Like that's when you have a design and you're like, this is going to be beautiful, and then you have to show people, right? And that means you have to draw everything to this, down to the tiniest detail. And I think that's something that I really took away with me during my 3 years studying architecture, because all my other time spent in academia and K through 12 was all STEM heavy, like 100% STEM, right? And what I learned was it really does take someone who truly knows what they're talking about to be able to explain everything in the tiniest detail, right? So if you have a design in architecture, you can't just say this is going to be great because XYZ, or kind of dance around it. You literally have to pinpoint every single detail.
Because it has to be rendered in reality.
Right.
You can't just live in your head.
Right. And that was one of the hardest lessons I learned through architecture was, I would have these like amazing pieces of architecture, grandiose, I'm sure, and come final review, I would present something that was half-baked because it was too grand, and a lot of times I couldn't execute on it. And I would say, just imagine what would this look like if it was finished, right? And nobody was ever sold on that.
It's almost like the whole entrepreneurial.
It is. It is.
Yeah, the parallels are insane.
Wow.
So you started in architecture, but you ended in neurobiology?
My degree is actually in psychology.
Oh.
But most of my free time is spent reading neuroscience. And if I had, if academia was what I wanted to go into, I think I would have essentially done what I did with the sleep study and kind of the trials that we're conducting now for Chrona Sleep, except through an academic setting, right? So in terms of like formal education, I didn't have what typically neuroscientists are supposed to have. But in terms of the actual knowledge and running the experiments and writing the papers, that is something that I am doing.
Interesting. So you have a degree in psychology. You left undergrad and immediately went to go co-found a company based on technology that is actually outside of your degree area. And,
right.
And the closest parallels to the work you're doing today are actually from your time studying architecture.
How did that work?
You know what? I just needed to say it all out loud so that we could reinforce the fact that we really never know where our paths are going to take us and where our knowledge, how our knowledge will build and how that will manifest itself in what we're doing. And I think the idea that you can make that circuitous pathway into what is now a burgeoning, emerging company is exciting to me, seeing those connections.
Yeah, and I think it really cannot be overstated how, kind of jumping into a different discipline or really just a whole different way of how things work, right? So architecture obviously works very differently on a technical level from any of the sciences. But no matter what you do, there's always experiences that you can extract that are consistent across everything, assuming that you're working with humans. And even beyond humans, right? It's like these lessons that I've learned in architecture apply readily to entrepreneurship and just everything.
So how did you talk to us about how you made this journey? I mean, you were...
a lot of things can happen at the end of undergrad. You can go work for somebody else. You can take a year off and find yourself. You can go back and get another advanced degree. And you chose to enter into entrepreneurship. How did that come to pass?
Yes. And with the technology that you chose.
Yeah. So it all started, I think, in spring of sophomore year, actually. So I took so I was never a fan of following the rules. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can share in this, and I decided that it would be a good idea for me to take the highest level entrepreneurship class there was, which at WashU was the Hatchery class.
Interesting.
So my co-founder Ben and I went into that class together, and interestingly enough, we actually failed the first time. We got an incomplete, right? Because they were merciful and said you can finish it off next semester, and
That's my friend Cliff's class.
Yes.
Cliff is great, and
I'm an executive
Ken
coach
as well
in that class.
Right, so hopefully you didn't really see what happened.
The half-baked version.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, Chrona which was actually called Hypnolarm. So with hypnogram, which is kind of like where you see your sleep stages, combined with alarm, and the idea is this would wake you up at the right time. So this was right around when Fitbit was coming up, and I actually had the idea for a smart pillow in, I think, high school, and I was like, man, I'm waking up feeling like crap. I wish there was a way I could feel better. On some days I wake up feeling better when, with these conditions, and so I had the idea really early on, and it wasn't until Fitbit kind of picked up that I realized this could be very viable. So we went into that class, did really poorly, and but continued on it because I really it was something that I was personally interested in. So neuroscience, why I consider myself a neuroscientist is because everything I do revolves around understanding the brain. Right? So this conversation we're having, right, and I'm very consciously thinking that, I need to project, right? I need to be able to put myself in a state of mind where I am able to articulate my thoughts, and that actually means paying less attention to certain other things, right? So everything from the very beginning, and I think this was because, not to go on a tangent, but
no, but this is about your passion. This is what you talk about. It's having a passion with something,
and it also is about how you see connections in the world.
Yes,
right. So you're a high school kid trying to figure out how to sleep better. You're an architecture student trying to figure out how to articulate your grand idea. You're a nonconformist deciding you're going to go right for the hardest possible course, and you're also comfortable enough, whether you knew it or not, to encounter the failure that might entail and come back from it. So that's a great that in and of itself is a really important way of understanding just how to look at the world in a different way.
In that case, I will continue.
Please.
So I think one of the reasons for how I ended up here is there was a very big point in my life when I was 8. My parents moved us, the family, from China to the United States. And I compare it to almost like dying. And the reason why I say that is and I'm still kind of trying to figure that experience out, right? And when I was that young, and everything I had known, right, mostly people, but not just the people, the culture, the way things worked, was suddenly just completely, all the rules changed, all the people changed, everything I knew disappeared, with the exception of my parents. And through that time, from when I moved to the States when I was 8 to today, how I've adapted was very much due to introspection. And because of introspection, that's also got me extremely interested in neuroscience, right? How is the brain able to rewire itself, and how, why some people are more able to kind of adapt their perspective about things and connect more dots, right, than others, and what causes this. So, fast forward to the entrepreneurship class. We took the idea and ran with it, and there were a lot of lessons that I didn't really realize existed to be learned. And the thing that motivates me, one of the top motivators, principles, is that I have to be constantly learning, constantly adapting. And entrepreneurship was the fastest way that was happening.
It's a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
It forces you to constantly reevaluate, constantly look at, is this the right opportunity that I'm pursuing? Does it fit with the market? That all of those things. And I think what you said is really impactful, especially for our audience. Well, you went through the class, you learned a lot of lessons, you failed, but then how did you how did you take that failure and move forward? What motivated you to say, you know what, yeah, I didn't do too well in this class, wasn't ready for it, but I think this is a good idea and I'm going to still pursue it?
Yeah, interestingly enough, that thought, like I don't have, when I'm reflecting and trying to, that thought didn't actually like decidedly occur. I think so again, kind of my experiences, a couple years in China, a couple years with really Asian parents has pretty much built failure as like the standard operating condition. So there was never a point like, oh, I failed, oh no, like should I continue this? It was just like, oh, okay, like next.
It's move on.
Perseverance is sort of built into your personal DNA.
Yeah,
something
everybody gets dealt different cards. That happens to be one of the cards I've been dealt. And so to answer your question, that thought of failure never even occurred to me.
It was a motivator.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I didn't do well in this class. Somebody, like these people said I didn't do well. Like, boo-hoo. That thought probably occurred, and then the thought that followed was, oh, they're just old white guys.
I love it. Love it.
I think I've had a similar thought occasionally.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important about that is that your intrinsic desire to keep learning. I think you may have abandoned the idea or the experiment had that no longer intrigued you.
Right.
But regardless of who was giving you feedback and whether that was being interpreted as success or failure, what you were interpreting was intellectual curiosity.
Yeah. And to maybe broaden the perspective a little bit. So in the very beginning, I had, my dad's a biochemist, and both my parents are in science. And so from the very beginning, I had this scientific mindset of, this is how you conduct experiments, this is how you prove things, this is the empirical method, basically, right? And that is, and supporting everything with data, good science, all those things are like fundamentally drilled into me. And then architecture happened, right, where the rules are just so totally different. And I think the most joy I get is kind of cracking the model of how, a different industry or different really way of thinking works, right? So like if I was to go to a scientist and sell them on the science behind Chrona, it would be very different than if I went to a designer or a visual communicator of sorts and try to sell them Chrona, right? It would be kind of the aesthetic elements. And the step after that was then business, right? I wanted to, it totally baffles me how business works.
As does for most people.
It's just like, it totally is. So many things are just nonsensical at all. And I totally get why, scientists, especially researchers, don't want to don't go into the business of commercializing their inventions. Because the rules are just so completely bizarre and different.
Well, science it's black or white.
Yes.
There's no gray.
Yes.
I share a science background with you.
Yes.
So transitioning into the business world where there's a whole bunch of gray, I think, but I think the way you're describing your journey, you took aspects of science, which is very logical, the way that you structure your mind to think, and then you took the architectural side, where it's mainly a lot of the creativity of how do you think through different problems, solutions, that kind of thing, and you melded that in order to come up with, I think, which is let's get to what Chrona is for our audience. What is Chrona?
And we're going to take just a short break, and then we'll come back and pick up right where we've left off.
We are learning through Alive and Well STL together. In order to be physically well, we must also be mentally and spiritually well.
And you already have those skills. You just need to add some of the more positive ones because you've learned all the negative ones.
Join this movement at aliveandwellstl.me.
Hello, my name is Zim. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Chrona Sleep. Entrepreneurial thinking, to me, means taking the opportunity to reflect and grow.
Well, welcome back. And Zim, we touched on a lot of different topics before, but tell us about what Chrona is and what the technology is and what the secret sauce is.
Yeah, so Chrona, I think I mentioned this, but basically it's a smart pillow. It tracks your sleep kind of like how Fitbit does, and then it uses acoustic and haptic, so vibrations to enhance the quality of your sleep. One of the biggest complaints we've heard about like the whole quantified self, tracking movement is that it doesn't actually do anything. So maybe for fitness that's not as impactful, but for sleep, I don't really know how many people wake up thinking, man, I'm so glad I tracked how awfully I slept. Right. So we wanted to design something that could actually improve the quality of sleep. And, there's a lot of pharmaceutical solutions and off the counter like melatonin kind of things that you can take. And there really has not been a method that I think taps into how the brain works directly to improve the quality of sleep. And so what Chrona does is that when it detects that you're in stable sleep, it'll emit a series of low frequency sounds that actually help synchronize your brainwave pattern in the delta frequency band. And that, to draw an analogy would be if you were listening to very, very slow music that helped you ease into deeper sleep. Except instead of music, it's highly controlled and highly specific to where you are in your sleep stage.
Very interesting.
Yes.
And I know you two could probably spend hours talking. The medical doctor and our neuroscientist could spend a whole episode on that. One of the things I wanted to explore a little bit more is, as you're building this company that is based on understanding the mind, and you have a personal fascination with how the mind works, how one's mindset can dictate how one goes. How has any of that, if at all, translated into actually how you're building the company, not just the product?
Great question. I think there's a lot of overlap, right? As we're building the product, we're constantly looking at how this affects us, both our consumers, but also us as a team, right? And, to bring it back to starting the company right after undergrad, we did not have quite the experience to execute flawlessly a hardware-software integrated, like connected device project, right? But being able to have this introspection, right, both for the product and for the team, we're really adapting as we move ahead, right? So, what is really important to our users, who our users are, right? What kind of company we want to build, right? We use the same process to answer both of these questions, which is you do something, then you reflect, right? And so very much, very, very overlapping.
And you have used the word introspection a few times. In your world, is introspection and introversion the same, or are those two separate things? Would you describe yourself as an introvert as well as someone who is introspective?
Yes, I definitely consider myself an introvert, an ambivert, but towards the introverted side.
Explain for our listeners.
Ambivert. Okay. So ambivert is just somewhere in the middle between introverted and extroverted. I think with how the mind computes things, it's much easier to black and white it, right? Because there's certainty. But really, all these things are connected. And so ambivert is really 99% of people are ambiverts, right? Because there's moments when, you're introverted, other moments when you're more extroverted, right? And I think those, I know for me personally, it has been quite a trial learning how to turn on my extroverted mode. And I think that's something that really successful introverted entrepreneurs have the ability to do. And in fact, I think it's a necessity. And
especially when you're out there and you're pitching for your company and having to deal with difficult questions and investors, or I think you're absolutely right. That's where the extrovert has to come out and has to play.
And the interesting thing is that we typically associate entrepreneurship with extroversion.
Yes.
And I think that the ability to take a moment, step back, and see that that introverts who might consider themselves to be less inclined to be an entrepreneur because they don't want to be at the front of the room, let's say, or they're not energized by being around lots of people.
Yes.
And they do need time to reflect that, in fact, what we need to step back and look at is what strength does that actually bring to the equation?
Excellent question. So there's this is something that I'm currently actively exploring. So the model there's my favorite model thus far is that innovation and new things come from introverts. That because introverts spend a lot of time alone and don't have others, extroverts, other people influencing them and kind of their thought process and what they're doing, they have the opportunity to really dive deep into a subject and really think about it in a way that is uninfluenced by the outside. And because of this, they have the opportunity to they're more likely to create something that involves something working differently than people expect it to, right? And then that's where the extroverts come in. The extroverts take with the introverts, work together with the introverts to see what they've created, right? And then spread the message. So that's my favorite model for kind of that, right? And to your point earlier, introverts can, and there's no reason why they can't do both things, right? Just like how extroverts can also spend and do what introverts do. It's just it's a little bit more difficult for them, right? And the other way around. So it really just is a matter of kind of making the leap, understanding where your default is, right? Where you're starting from.
So it comes into play almost like when you're building your team. When you talk about the types of personality or the personality types of individuals and how you relate to these individuals and how you bring them onto your team, I think is very for your organization, I would think is critical, where a lot of people don't think about specifically the types of personalities, the type of skills until they've managed through a crisis because the right person is not on the team.
I mean, a lot of times what we spend our time talking to entrepreneurs about is finding out, what do you like to do, what are you good at, what do you not like to do, and what is better served by somebody who can do it better and faster than you, rather than learning it yourself, right? We don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about what kind of personalities and world views, how you actually come into the world, your preferred mode of learning, thinking, resting, whatever the case may be, what that actually brings to the team
and I think,
well.
Yeah, you bring a unique perspective, because a lot of founders are literally trying to put the company together, put the technology together, and they are looking for, okay, I need you as a software developer, not just you as a software developer, but how do you work in the organization? How will that best fit?
So how has that actually manifested? How have the extroverts come into play for your organization?
Yeah. So my co-founder Ben was the extrovert, right? So in the very beginning, he did all the pitching, all the networking, and that model worked out well until it got out of control, and there was essentially like a codependency happening of sorts, where I did all the work in the back end and he did all of the, like, we were forming these silos. So that turned out to be not a great idea.
You actually needed to stretch both ways. That. He needed to take a little bit of a step back at times, and you needed to step forward at times.
Right, yeah.
And be able to do both sides of the business, essentially.
Exactly.
Balancing.
And I think the best teams are created from these T-shaped team members.
Okay, so tell us about the T-shape.
Yes, so T-shaped is you have at the top of the T, a really broad, top, I guess. So you have knowledge and expertise in kind of these various domains. And then there's the leg of the T. So, and then one really deep expertise in one area, right? So what we had created was an I, right? We both did a couple of things really, really well, but we didn't really have this breadth. And I think that, honestly, is one of the things that you do get from, I think, spending some time in corporate or right, developing your other, these soft skills and other basic to round off the top of the T. Yeah.
So even with that insight, as we've noted, an insight that not many entrepreneurs bring to the table, at least not at this stage in their company's development, because what we may not have mentioned is that you're in beta and fundraising stage. So you're still fairly early on in the overall evolution of bringing your idea to market.
Right.
So we're not talking about somebody who's spent the last 5 years building this team. You've spent the last
3 years if you count undergrad. So
okay,
like a year.
I'll count.
And a half.
I'll count undergrad.
And he's an Arch Grant winner.
Yes, I mean a lot of resources, and I know you did an accelerator in Arkansas as well.
Right.
And so you've had a lot of those ecosystem supports, and we've just talked about how that team gets built. Even with all of that, mentors, funding, understanding the psychology of what it means to be an entrepreneur and how you go about building the teams, I can only imagine that you've actually also had some encounters with your team that haven't been stellar. They haven't gone the way you want them to. That you've got the technical expertise, but something else isn't working, or you have somebody who's a really great personality but can't step up to the plate on the thing they need to do from a technical standpoint. How have you negotiated that part of the business?
That's a really tough question.
I know.
Because it is a balance between, can we get the technical output that we're looking for versus can we cultivate a culture that is scalable that, others would, want to join and be a part of, right? So I think I may have, from my perspective, I spend a lot of time looking at, kind of the emotional and interpersonal qualities of the team. And this is with the idea in mind that this is the type of team, this is the type of culture that I want, our company to be when, if it scales, right? And simultaneously, it can only scale in this method. So, to back up a little bit, from my perspective, if I can't lay the groundwork for a $1 billion company from the onset, I want to be able to do that. And I think a lot of times when you have a focus on the technical output first, you run into these hurdles later on, right? I mean, but you can argue the same thing from the opposite end, that if you don't do these things,
you don't focus on
you don't get the product, right?
Exactly.
And so it's really, from my perspective, these interpersonal things and these team dynamics, especially when things don't work out, take priority. And I think we have come across a lot of hardships, and it is because those things have been prioritized. So I don't really know if we would have gone to where we are today if I was really focused on technical output, right? And if the team did not deliver, then there would be consequences of people getting fired, or I don't know what. I mean, we can get creative with those, but at the end of the day, we were able to win an Arch Grant. We were able to launch a successful Kickstarter, get into, get to where we are today because the team we have, and that is always first priority.
So how do you determine who plays a role on your team? How do you look at diversity or inclusion? How do you determine the skill sets and the type of team with the type of experiences that are out here in the marketplace? How do you determine that? Because it's been I don't want to say issue, but this is a challenge in the entrepreneurial community because usually entrepreneurs hire people that they know. Or they know of, instead of looking very broadly and looking at how can I get the best people on my team that's not just coming from my network, they're coming from a broad set of network and
So
this introspective process that you have.
Yeah, that's a multivariate question for sure. So from the very beginning, the base has to be that there's some desire whether to work on the company, whether because of the product or because of the people, right? You got to be able to make the sell somehow for someone to join the team. so that at least one aspect of desire has to be there. And then I think it really comes down to experience. So first, the experience of the entrepreneur. From where I'm starting, from where I started, right, in undergrad, I didn't have access to top talent, right? And I didn't even have, the ideas, the very important ideas of inclusion, diversity. These things were not on my mind in the very beginning, right? Because when you start from nothing, essentially, or I guess like a nice ecosystem, but no personal experience, it's hard to attract the level of talent that that more experienced entrepreneurs who have gone through corporate are able to do, right? So I didn't have that professional network built out. So what I looked for, and I think similar entrepreneurs will probably have to look for, is at least from my perspective, it's the ability, the capability for growth, right? So that was the one criteria that I looked for. That could this person scale with the company? Could this person grow with me? And with that in mind, then came the technical skill and some of the other also very important things, which I think is more or less reversed when you are more experienced as an entrepreneur, right? When you have access to starting with someone who's very established and has all the skills that technical skills are necessary for this company. So
it's not just technical; it's the emotional side too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you're trying to scale from a very small company to a very large company, I would think you're looking for talent that has the ability to manage it from a small environment and take it to a larger environment too, as well.
And I'm curious too as to whether or not any of your mentors have pushed back on your approach. Because they have gone through corporate. They may have this is the way the world works kind of perspective, or this is what's worked for me in the past, and this deviates from that. So have you had any of that pushback?
Yes, absolutely. And the point I want to focus on is this is the way the world works part. And that is, I can't describe how...
aggravating.
How just like frustrating when I realized that, because in the beginning there were especially in like the Hatchery class, right, and the mentors we had there, and the things that they said as if it was law, as if this is how you do things, and coming from a scientific upbringing, I took that as truth. With a capital T, right? So when they say you have to go do this market research, you have to have these things in order to raise money, I took that as truth. And that is not how business works, right? A truth here in St. Louis is different from the same truth in
other ecosystems.
San Francisco, for instance. And it's incredible how many entrepreneurs, kind of go through these hurdles, right? And if things work out, great. And if things don't, well, that's the thing is if you do it enough times, it always works out. And when it does work out and you've solved it, that's it, right? For most entrepreneurs, it means they figured it out and they rinse and repeat and they do it over and over and over again. But the rules are different in a different ecosystem. And if you took the entrepreneurial approach that is standard here for, let's say, biotech or life sciences, and you took this to San Francisco, right, and you got a patent and you were able to prove the technology and you wanted to sell it in the consumer space, let's say, they will laugh at you. They will say, like, show me traction. How many have you sold already? Right. And it's the exact opposite. If there's a company called Yo. It's an app. It does one thing, or in the very beginning, it did one thing. You click a button and it sends yo, the words yo. And they were able to raise at a $10 million valuation, $10 million because they had customers. Imagine raising money for yo in St. Louis.
You don't raise money for yo in St. Louis.
Exactly.
Although we do have the invisible boyfriend and girlfriend.
I was going to say,
so we might actually be hip and cool enough to do that. But I take your point, which is the ecosystems are different, the rules are different, the expectations are different, and you need to be flexible and able to understand the market you're in, whether that's as an entrepreneur trying to sell or as an entrepreneur trying to raise money.
But I think that goes to who are you trying to raise money from? Because that's exactly, I think the point is there are some investors who want all the market research, and especially if you're going into life science in the not consumer side, but the professional side of life science, versus others that say, yes, I want to see traction. I want to see customers that you have. So it goes back to the flexibility and understanding that, which I think goes back to the intuitiveness that you look at.
Yeah.
And we also see in that it goes back to how the world works is different in different places.
Right.
So it sounds as though your reaction to this is how the world works is to say perhaps. And depending on different circumstances, we may have different results.
Yeah.
And has that been an effective way of being able to manage that pushback?
I think so. And I mean, the perspective I take really is if if I want to be able to create something that impacts the whole, that everybody can use, then it needs to be adaptive and take into account all these different worlds, right? And really, that's kind of that has been my personal philosophy too, just like this integrative approach. So I kind of see where Chrona is and where me personally as an entrepreneur is as the bridge, primarily as a bridge between the scientific community and the consumers, right? So there's all of this wealth of literature on sleep science that if that never makes it out to see the light of day yet. And if so quick segue, when I was sleeping 3-4 hours during architecture, I thought that was awesome, right? And but as I got started with Chrona, I kind of dug into the literature of neuroscience, of sleep research. I kind of saw that I was killing myself, right? And that this amount of time I spent is coming out of sometime in the future. And if all of this, if the things that I know today that I've read through this process with Chrona was available to everybody, I don't think anybody would be proud of sleeping 4 hours a night, 6 hours a night. Right?
But I think what's very interesting is that you've taken it's being an entrepreneur. If somebody tells you, no, you need to do this then, but you're like, no, I need to do something else. You take, which is great. It seems like you take the feedback, you look at from your perspective, no, this is what I really need to do. I'm going to take that advice, but I'm going to change what I'm doing to maybe move my model forward in a different way. And I think entrepreneurs, when we always talk about, you have to have the passion, because there are going to be people that tell you no in different ways, and if you stop at that no, you'll never get to the next step at your journey. Right. So I really like the introspection that you go through, but you also look at, that might be your truth, but you know what, I need to further my knowledge, as well as further the technology that I'm developing.
So as our time together comes to a close, I was struck by your introspection, your reflection, your need for passion to mix all of that together. What are the other takeaways that you would leave our listeners with regard to either your entrepreneurial experience or how to approach the entire process?
Self-awareness.
That's a really good...
Start with self-awareness.
That is a very good point.
Find your strengths, find your weaknesses, and then consciously make the decision that this is this something that you're willing to go through, right? Because it was, in the very beginning, the reason why these silos between my co-founder and I formed was because I was absolutely terrified of getting on stage, and even the thought of it, sent my pores sweating, right? But today, I am so happy to have the opportunity to speak to a crowd, to speak to both of you and the audience here, and it's and I enjoy it, right? And that is something that I consciously made a decision, not so much compared to maybe like going in starting a company and just continuing the project. I can definitively remember the point where I decided, if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to pitch. I need to be able to overcome this fear and, improve this skill. And that starts with self-awareness, right? You have to know where your strengths and weaknesses are.
That is a very good point.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for spending time with us today.
Yes.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Changing the way you view new ventures, igniting your thinking about entrepreneurship. It's Entrepreneurially Thinking. Get connected and discover more. Visit our website for show notes, resources, information about our guests, upcoming events, and of course, all your favorite episodes. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them for us in the comment sections, and be sure to leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The best way to show love is to share. Let everybody know that you're thinking entrepreneurially. So visit our website, entrepreneuriallythinking.com. #ETHINKSTL. Entrepreneurially Thinking is another positive production of RareGem Productions. Thanks for listening.